we are in the thick of the pursuit. And by thick of the pursuit, I mean that period of integration that we discussed in the previous module under Anatomy of a Pursuit, during which we are integrating and interacting with all of the client's staff. And why do we do that? To gather information. That's why we meet with the client, to gather information on their understanding, their needs, their desires for the project. When we do that, what's the result? If you ask enough questions, you find out nobody agrees exactly as to how the project should be conducted. Now you have a common starting point, and you should have a common ending point, because you have a project that is a deliverable to the client at the end. So you know what that's going to look like. But how you get from here to there can be completely different depending on who you talk to. And why is that? It's simple. Each one of us has a different roadmap of the world. Take this example and try it with your staff to demonstrate what I'm talking about. At your next team meeting or staff meeting, have everyone take out a piece of paper and pick a location that is, say, 5 miles from your office. And the instruction that you want to give everyone around the table is to write down directions from getting from the office to this location that you've selected. Take a few minutes to have them do that, and then have them read or map out, even better, their ways of getting from point A to point B. What you'll find is everyone started at the office and everyone ended at the same place, but the path that they took to get there were often completely different. And it's the same way with a client and a pursuit. I've taken this concept and put it together in this graphic that we're going to talk about today, so that you can conceptualize how your meetings need to take place, what to do with the information that you're getting in those client meetings, and how to triangulate that information to give you the best product possible. That's today's topic. So let's take a full screen blow up of our conceptual diagram, and let's talk about the different pieces. As it says right at the top, the reality is in the shared roadmap. And what this means is, if you are talking to just one individual at the client and they're your sole source of information, you have to remember that the information you're getting is going through that individual's own personal filters, their concept, and their idea of the project. And it may or may not match up with the other decision makers and members of the client's team. So what we show at the top, we have 4 different pathways. These pathways illustrate 4 different individuals at a client's organization that will be involved in the decision team on consultant selection. You can see that 3 of these pathways lead to the pot of gold. And the last one on the right, the black one, ends up on a dead end someplace else. Let's talk about that dead end first. Now, you may have run into this. I know I certainly have in my experience, that there is somebody on the client's team that simply is marching to the beat of a different drum. They have a different idea for the project. They're on the team, but they don't necessarily agree with the project, and they're going to do what they can to get the project to go the direction they want. Sort of a damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead, I want to do this my way. Now, if that individual is the only one you're communicating with on the team, you might find yourself at the end of the process at a dead end with information that the rest of the decision makers don't agree with, never considered as correct, and don't see that as a feasible way to conduct the project. And what does that leave you with? A big empty bag of effort and expenses on your pursuit and no way to backtrack to get back to the final victory. That's why it's so important to meet with, interact with, and question in a meaningful way as many people on the client's team as you can. What I've tried to conceptualize in this diagram is that your key to getting the correct information and the bits of information that connect with the greatest number of decision makers possible is to identify those places where the lines are parallel and close together. So let's look at some of those. Here's a first location where the red, green, and blue lines are running parallel. The green and blue are very close together. The red is a little bit farther, but it's still running parallel. That indicates a similar message that you're getting from those three decision makers. Now, here's another location where that happens, and another location where that happens as well. Now, the reason that these three locations are important is that indicates a point in your discussions where these three decision makers are very close in agreement on these particular points. So why is that of value? Well, in an interview, your client teams aren't going to remember a massive information that you're going to deliver and your competitor are going to deliver. They're going to remember some key points. And our diagram shows that there's three key points that they agree on. These need to be your key points in your proposal. It hits on the key points that they've all mentioned and key points that they all agree on. This creates a nice tight link between your approach and their view of the needs. Now, there's some places where you want to identify where the lines cross perpendicular to one another. When this happens, that's an indication that the two pathways are contradictory to one another, and the opinions and the views are different. Now, in an interview or putting your proposal together or your communications with the client, there's two things that you want to do when you notice or identify one of these perpendicular crossings. One is to check it or triangulate it with another individual, or during your discussions with the two individuals that have crossing paths, try to gain some clarification. If there isn't clarification, or the clarification is they simply don't agree, this is something that you want to stay away from if you can in your proposal or your interview. And the reason is, by taking one side or another, you're going to alienate at least one decision maker. And you don't want to do that prior to the selection. That's something that you can save and work out after you're contracted. But don't try to work it out prior to the selection. And you can see there's 1, 2, 3 locations where that happens on the diagram between different color paths. Now, there's also paths that you'll know that are here that completely lay on top of one another. That's great. That's even better than the lines being close together or parallel. When you have lines that are laying on top of one another, that indicates complete agreement between those decision makers. And those are other points that you want to make sure you have in your proposal and in your interview. It's a very straightforward concept and something that I think the diagram helps to understand. We meet with client and client representatives during the course of a project. Often we don't meet with as many as we need to. And when we are meeting with numerous members of the client team, we fail to triangulate the information that we get from the different individuals. And that's the key. It's not what you hear from one person that you like and run with. You need to take the information that you gather as a whole, bring it together, triangulate that information, and identify where there's agreement and identify where there's complete disagreement. And with that information, you can identify where your clients are parallel, where they overlap, and where they disagree. And when you have that information, you can tailor your message to meet the needs of the client. And after all, that's what we need to do to be selectable. Find a pursuit that you're working on now where you're having discussions with the client and you're in the thick of it, and put this new tool to work and triangulate that information so that you know you're delivering the message that your client wants to hear. We'll see you next time. Thanks a lot.